Good morning, everybody. I hope this message finds you safe and warm at home during these snowy, cold times that we're having here in Illinois. And if you're not in Illinois and you're watching this, I hope you're safe and warm also on this beautiful February morning. I had an idea to use kind of a Billy Mays reference for my sermon today. I don't know if you know who Billy Mays is, but he's like the infomercial king that's probably best known for pitching OxyClean. And Billy would lay out all these amazing things that OxyClean would do for you and your clothes, and then he'd tell you what a great deal you were going to get, and then he'd throw both hands out like this, and he'd be like, "But wait, there's more." And I feel like there's definitely an element of that in this last chapter of Ruth. But the more I thought about it, this little Old Testament book ends really more like a Disney movie. Now, I've got 5 kids from age 28 to 17, so I have watched my fair share of Disney and Pixar, so I feel like I'm a little bit of an expert in making this comparison. And almost all of the movies, they begin the same way. Some tragedy befalls the main characters, usually a death in the family or some other kind of tragic loss, just like we saw in the book of Ruth. And then all of these movies also kind of end the same way. They lived happily ever after, right? Which is also how the book of Ruth ends. It's a fairy tale ending, just like in the movies. You know, Snow White isn't dead. Pinocchio is a real boy. The Fox and the Hound really can be friends. Woody and Buzz save the day. Elsa is finally able to accept herself. We like those sorts of endings because it means that we can all go to bed happy and that there is something nice in this world. Um, but is that real life, right? Can we really have an expectation of happily ever after? Well, we're going to explore that this morning as we look at the last chapter of the book of Ruth, Ruth chapter 4, and I'll be reading verses 1 through 22. Boaz went to the gate of the town and sat down there. Soon the family redeemer Boaz had spoken about came by. Boaz said, "Come over here and sit down." So he went over and sat down. Then Boaz took 10 men from the town's elders and said, "Sit here." And they sat down. He said to the Redeemer, "Naomi, who has returned from the territory of Moab, is selling the portion of the field that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should inform you, buy it back in the presence of those seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you want to redeem it, do it. But if you do not want to redeem it, tell me so that I will know, because there isn't anyone other than you to redeem it, and I am next after you." "I want to redeem it," he answered. Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the field from Naomi, you will acquire Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the deceased man, to perpetuate the man's name on his property." The Redeemer replied, "I can't redeem it myself, or I will ruin my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption, because I cannot redeem it." At an earlier point in Israel, a man removed his sandal and gave it to the other party in order to make a matter legally binding concerning the right of redemption or in the exchange of property. This was the method of legally binding a transaction in Israel. So the Redeemer removed his sandal and said to Boaz, "Buy the property back yourself." Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses today that I am buying from Naomi everything that belonged to Elimelech, Chilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabitess, Mahlon's widow, as my wife to perpetuate the deceased man's name on his property, so that his name will not disappear among his relatives or from the gate of his hometown. You are witnesses today." All of the people who were at the city gate, including the elders, said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is entering your house like Rachel and Leah, who together built the house of Israel. May you be powerful in Ephrathah, and your name be well known in Bethlehem. May your house become like the house of Perez, the son Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring the Lord will give you by this young woman." Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. He slept with her, and the Lord granted conception to her, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord who has not left you without a family redeemer today. May his name become well known in Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. Indeed, your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him." Naomi took the child, placed him on her lap, and became a mother to him. The neighbor women said, "A son has been born to Naomi," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the son of David. Verse 18. Now these are the family records of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Amminadab. Amminadab fathered Nahshon. Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. Now, I think that's a happy ending, right? I think Disney would be happy with that kind of ending, right? But is it realistic? Is the story only about happily ever after? Well, I'll give you a sneak peek to the end. It's not. It's not just about happily ever after, right? This is one of those, but wait, there's more than happily ever after kind of endings, right? And so we're going to work our way through the text, and I'll show you just exactly how that plays out. You can see that it's obviously happy ever after for Ruth, right? It seems hard to believe, but this all kind of happens, right? This Boaz went to the town, the gate of the town, just less than 24 hours since Naomi first came up with her plan for Ruth and her to find rest. And if you remember her kind of radical, strange plan from last week, it was get washed, perfume up, get nicely dressed, and then go lay down at the feet of Boaz's bed. And then she instructed Ruth to ask Boaz to marry her in the middle of the night. Well, her plan worked, right? But there's one small problem. There's a wrinkle in the plot, if you will. We discover there's another kinsman redeemer who's first in line before Boaz. Now, I don't know about you, but when I read this, I sense that Boaz is on a mission, right? Remember last week, Ruth and Boaz get up early at a time when no one can recognize that there's a woman there, and he gives her this big heap of barley. And then he goes to the gate and he waits. And he's looking for a certain guy, right? He knows that the town gate is the best place to find this guy. It's also the best place to conduct important business back in that culture because the elders are on hand. They hang out at the gate and they discuss all the business of the town. So they're on hand to witness these kind of business transactions. And so this guy eventually comes, and we never really know his name. In fact, the Hebrew text seems to be deliberately vague. Probably the best translation for us to use this morning is old Mr. So-and-so, right? So old Mr. So-and-so shows up, and Boaz says, look, we need to talk about a deal. And I love Boaz just seems so smooth about this, right? So casual. It's just like so relaxed about it. He says, Mr. So-and-so, there's this old widow, Naomi, and she has this land, remember, and no one is there to inherit it. Everybody in her family has died. Probably everybody that's sitting there is like, oh, yeah, I remember that. Because, remember, Bethlehem is a small town, so Naomi's return as a poor widow was likely widely known. And the law required that, if all possible, that the land should remain in the family and be offered to the nearest relative. So this is actually a pretty good deal for old Mr. So-and-so, right? Because here's how the process works. When he says, I will redeem it, what he's actually agreeing to is to take over the land until the year of Jubilee, which occurs every 50 years. And then at the year of Jubilee, all the property that was bought in this way reverts back to the family of the original owner, which in this case would be the sons of Elimelech. But Elimelech's sons died. He has no sons, so the land would not need to be given back. So at first glance, it looks like this man is signing up to get property that he will be able to add to his own inheritance. And then Boaz throws in, but wait, there's more. If you want the land, you also get Moabite the widow. In this case, the Moabite widow is Ruth, right? She's the only one that can still physically maintain the line of the dead family. She can still have babies and keep the family name going. So when she has a son, in the year of Jubilee, the land will pass on to him, and Mr. So-and-so gets, nothing, right? Well, it's not entirely accurate. He gets a family, he gets sons, he gets the land, but with that extra heir, he has to divide his own property with this extra heir. So this once-in-a-lifetime deal kind of comes with some strings, and the strings are wedding strings, right? And so we see this deal, the guy passes, he takes a hard pass, and in the end, in our happily ever after, Boaz gets Ruth, right? Ruth is now secure. So this is her happily ever after. Her and Naomi are protected. They're going to be looked at after. In other words, happily ever after. Except for Mr. So-and-so, who now needs to buy a new pair of sandals because he had to give one away. But wait, there's more. This story is more than just happily ever after. Because not only is Ruth getting a husband, she's getting redeemed. So what does that mean? It means that she doesn't owe anything to anyone. It means that she's been given a new place, a new land, a new name. She's no longer Ruth the Moabitess. Now she is Ruth, the wife of Boaz. Ruth has security. Being redeemed means that her past has been made irrelevant. Her future is secure in the land and the family line. Her future is secure in the hand of God. And that is what redemption brings. Too often in this world, we're like old Mr. So-and-so here. We say, well, what's in it for me? What's this going to cost me? Will it bring me fulfillment? Will I enjoy it? We make our evaluations based on all sorts of criteria, and sometimes, maybe too many times, we forget to ask, what blessing does God want me to have in this? Because, see, God wants to bless us, right? In the Old Testament, that blessing is worded like this in Jeremiah, and you see it on every graduation card ever sold, basically. It says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." It isn't saying, I'm going to give you a big house and a fancy car and lots of money, because those aren't the things that make up life. It's saying, God is saying, trust me for the unknowns that tomorrow will bring. In the New Testament, you see this blessing also in Romans 8:29. He says, and we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose, right? It's in God's nature to bring good, to bring the good things that will keep you walking faithfully on this journey that we're on to eternity. But to get to the blessings, we need to go into each day living as those who have been redeemed. Living redeemed means remembering and believing our past has been taken care of, no matter what that past looks like, right? No matter how much we thought we were an outsider. Living redeemed means we have a place, we have security, and nothing is able to take that away from us. Not even the mistakes of life that we keep on making, right? Not even in those times that we think we've completely let God down. Living redeemed means we don't owe anything to anyone because the price has already been paid. I'm convinced that way too many Christians don't really believe this because they keep trying to work their way to salvation. Listen, Jesus says, it is finished. And he also says, you are mine. Living redeemed is so much more than happily ever after. Which brings us to the other main character in this book, right? Naomi. You look at Naomi's happily ever after, and it can be summed up, in one word, really, grandchild. When Naomi comes back from Moab, she wanted people to call her bitter, right? Mara, because she went away full and she came back empty. But now that emptiness is filled, right? That emptiness is filled by the fact that the loss of her two sons has been more than compensated by this daughter-in-law who we read, who loves you more than 7 sons. Ruth's devotion to Naomi has caused Naomi's life to be filled with blessing. But more than that, that emptiness has been filled because Naomi has an heir to continue on her husband's name. Verse 16 and 17 describes the child this way, right? Then Naomi took the child, laid him on her lap, and cared for him, and became a mother to him. And the women living there said, a son has been born to Naomi. Ruth's willingness to stick with Naomi has not only led to security for her, but it's led to security and rest for Naomi. If you've known anyone who's been struggling to be able to conceive a child, and then they finally do, maybe you can get a little bit of an understanding of the joy that is involved here. But when you add to that picture that the security, that's not just children, it's more than family, it's more than land, well, you really see what's going on here, right? Because everybody's happy. And if you stop the story right here, it's a good place to close it. It's kind of like a Lion King ending, right, where they hold up the newborn cub of Simba and Nala and start singing "It's the Circle of Life." Happily ever happily ever after, definitely. But wait, there's more, right? Why is it that Naomi is no longer bitter? It's not just because she has land. It's not just because her family name is going to be carried on. I have grandchildren now, and that's a great blessing, but it's not just because of that. Naomi is no longer bitter because she's finally understood that the Lord has been with her the whole time, all of the times. The emotional time when they had to move away to Moab, the heart-wrenching time when her husband and her kids pass away, the tear-filled time when her and Ruth returned to Israel, the sparking of hope time when Boaz made Ruth welcome on his land, that anxious time as we see Ruth wait to see what Boaz would do with her marriage proposal, the apprehensive time as negotiation between these two kinsman redeemers take place, and then the joyful time when a marriage takes place and a child is born. God has been involved in all of those times, the good times and the bad times. If we just take life as one slice and base all of our perception on what's going on in just that one slice, we're probably going to find ourselves really struggling with life more often than not. I mean, if I just focus on ministry during those times when it's hard, when I'm not seeing spiritual growth in people, or when members choose to get mad and leave, if I just focus on that, I could get very disheartened. I could become very bitter and angry. The flip side of that is if I just focus on ministry when things are going really well, when things are really easy, like when we're baptizing people every month, like we were there for a while, I could become pretty naive, right? I need it all. I need the good times and the difficult times. I wouldn't be the pastor that I am today unless I had all of it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Because in all of it, God has been working for his purposes. And I would say that applies to all of you as much as it applies to me, right? Not just so we can say, hey, we all lived happily ever after, but so we can say God has been working through all of this mess that we call life. And as we look at what's happening here in the life of Naomi, it's imperative that we understand that there is more to life than just happily ever after. Because let's be honest, we don't live in a fairy tale, right? In real life, the boy goes to some other girl and he forgets about Snow White and he goes and kisses somebody else instead. In real life, Geppetto gets hard up for when the winter gets cold and Pinocchio becomes firewood. In real life, the fox becomes a fur coat and Woody and Buzz end up in a donation box to Goodwill. In real life, the bigoted world can't accept Elsa for who she is. That's why we can't stop at happily ever after. That's why we need that. But wait, there's more than happily ever after for all of us. And you can see that is in this chapter as well. There is more than happily ever after just by looking at two lists of names. And the first one is here in the book of Ruth, right? Now, these are the family records of Perez. Perez fathered Hezron. Hezron fathered Ram. Ram fathered Aminadab. And Aminadab fathered Nahshon. And Nahshon fathered Salmon. Salmon fathered Boaz. Boaz fathered Obed. Obed fathered Jesse. And Jesse fathered David. And then if you forward to the book of Matthew, you read, this is the genealogy of Jesus the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham, right? And it starts out, Abraham was the father of Isaac. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Judah the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar. And then we go through all of this again. We get to Obed, father Jesse. Jesse fathered David. And in Matthew it reads, David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. And when you put these two lists of names together, you find this amazing truth. I think it's just really important that we get this morning out of these verses, right? Ruth, the Moabitess. Ruth, the outsider. Ruth, the widow who comes to a foreign land that holds no promise for her, meets Boaz, an Israelite, a faithful Israelite, But Boaz has a little bit of a checkered past too, right? In his ancestry, Boaz actually has an ancestor named Rahab. It's the same Rahab who was the unlikely heroine of the story of the Battle of Jericho found in the book of Joshua, right? Rahab was a prostitute. She was a harlot who spared the Jewish spies with a lie, with deception. Rahab is a foreign woman who had a very questionable means of income. So when we look at this union here in Ruth from the outside, you have the ancestor of a non-Jewish prostitute, Boaz, married to, well, up to this point, a barren foreigner. And if you look at just those facts, you may wonder what good could possibly come from that. I mean, seriously, what kind of messed up plan is this? But then we look at this blessing that the people gave to Boaz, right? May you have standing, may you be famous, may your name be known in Bethlehem through the offspring that the Lord gives you through this young woman. And it turns out that this outsider, this barren outsider, and this Israelite who comes from questionable ancestry become the great grandparents of King David. And I'd say that's pretty famous in Bethlehem. And if you go further down the line in that genealogy of Matthew that I started, that name goes on to name all the descendants of David, coming down to Jacob, the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, of whom was born Jesus, who is called Christ. You can't have better standing in Bethlehem than that. You don't get more famous than that. I love this story because God has been at work so much here, more than just what meets the eye. The line to the Messiah comes from outsiders. It comes because outsiders were included in the story. This tells me that nobody is too far outside of the plan of God that they cannot be brought in. Nobody, including you. Look, if you're looking for just happily ever after, go to Disneyland, right? But if you're looking for more than happily ever after, trust the plans of the Redeemer. You may not always understand it. You may not always like it. But you can be sure of one thing. When the Redeemer is involved, we are never just Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so. We are personally named by the Redeemer. Listen, God knows your name. And you can be outsiders who have been brought into the family of God if you just believe. Let's pray. Father, thank you for this time this morning. Thank you for this message this morning. I pray, Lord, that no matter who hears these words, I pray a blessing for them, Lord. I pray that they would come to know you, to come to believe you, to come to believe in you. And I pray for our Christian friends and my brothers and sisters that are listening this morning, Lord, that they would come to understand that you have a purpose in all things. And even if our circumstances don't look ideal, if they don't look like they're heading towards happily ever after, that you promise more than that to us. And all we have to do is trust you. No matter what we can see, no matter what it feels like, we can trust you. And you are involved in our lives, from the mundane to the exciting, from the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. Help us to live that kind of redeemed life, Lord, a life that trusts you, that you've done all that needs to be done. Help us to live for your honor and your glory. It's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Again, thank you each one for being here this morning. I hope that you stay safe, and I will see you again next week. Next week is Valentine's Day. It is also, for the Southern Baptist Convention, Racial Reconciliation Day. So I'll be speaking a little bit about that and how to love your neighbor of every color as we meet again next week. God bless, and I'll see you then.